I want to say what's up to everybody. This your guy Keith with At You Communication. We doing the episode of the Average Nobody here. I got my man Sergeant Terrence Lott with me. I won't say what police department he's with because he's not speaking as a representative of the department. He's speaking as a black police officer and as a black man. And we're speaking on the things that has recently went on in the news. One thing in particular we're talking about is the Tyree Nichols situation. But we're gonna start with, I'm gonna let him introduce and tell you a little bit about his background.
Okay, good evening. My name is, as Brother Keith said, my name is Sergeant Terrence Lott, Sr. To give a quick disclaimer, as Brother Keith said, the views expressed and opinions expressed in this video are mine and solely mine, and are not reflective of my employer or come from my employer. They're just my views, my opinions. So therefore, just know that this is just me talking to you, and it has nothing to do with my employer or anything like that. I'm just thrilled and appreciative of Brother Keith to give me an opportunity to give my views and my side of from this side. I come from a unique perspective as a black police officer because we get both sides of it. 99% of the black police officers grew up around other black people in an urban area, and we get both sides of the coin when it comes to the current rift. I'll call it a rift between the community and police officers in general. To give you a little background about myself, I'm 54 years old, I'm married, have 5 children. Have been in the law enforcement field since 1991. So I'm going into my 34th year of law enforcement. I've done everything as far as law enforcement with the exception of executive protection. I've done bodyguard service for Mary J. Blige, several others. I've worked the hospital detail as a sheriff's deputy, and I am currently assigned as a BFO, that is a Bureau of Field Operations police sergeant in a municipality in St. Louis County here. I enjoy that job, and I have been in that capacity for approximately 7 years. March the 3rd, I believe, or March the 4th will be my 7th year in that capacity.
Okay, all right. So you all got the background history of. So I actually went to someone who can help us and help us navigate through certain situations that a lot of us oppose with when we come to being engaged with law enforcement, if we want to call it that, being in that capacity or engagement with law enforcement. Now, one of the questions that I would like to ask you is, when an officer pulls a person over, what are some of the things a citizen could do that would make that officer feel a little bit more at ease? Let's start with that.
Okay, so to start with that, firstly, I will not divulge anything that would jeopardize a police officer's safety. Correct. So with that being said, really, the things that you should do is what I do as a police officer. Keep in mind, when I'm out of uniform and dressed in my street clothes, they may not know I'm a police officer unless they know my car.
Correct.
Or whatever the case may be. I will give our audience the same advice that I give my sons. One, your job as a citizen, when you are pulled over with the police, number one job is to comply. Comply with a reasonable, lawful request. Secondly, your job is to make that officer feel like he's safe. And I know that may sound crazy, but you got to understand, it's a dangerous job. We took that job. So we're not asking for any special treatment. We're just asking you to understand that we want to be safe just like you. And every police officer that pulls you over has a guideline that they should go by called the 8-step car stop. Some of the things I will give you, you can Google. It's not a secret. And I feel like every citizen should know these things. So part of the 8-step car stop involves the officer's decision to pull over that vehicle for whatever the infraction is or whatever the investigative stop is. The first part is that decision. Once that decision is made, the officer should approach the vehicle and the officer should introduce himself, his department, and give the citizen the reason why they were pulled over. It should not be a guessing game. That is not our teaching. That is not the academy taught procedure. That's why it's called an 8-step car stop, because we have 8 steps that the officer should go through in a normal car stop. Now keep in mind, in police work, if something were to go awry and something go wrong, we're not required to go through each step. If there is something that is dangerous, we're allowed to deviate from that 8 step and go to something that would help us with our safety. So with that being said, once the officer tells the citizen why they were pulled over, they make the introduction, then there should be a request for a driver's license. And in the state of Missouri, proof of insurance. Registration is not required in most places in the state of Missouri. However, an officer may ask you for it. I've been around a while and I don't hear Missouri officers ask for registration, because we get that when we run your plate, if your plate is correct. So after that, the officer goes back to the car and he makes the decision as to whether or not he's going to cite that individual for the infraction or whatever. And then he writes out the summons or summonses, and then he returns to the car. Now, a good officer should explain to you what you did and what he observed, and then give you the remedy to dispose of the ticket. When I say dispose of the ticket, that's a fancy word for take care of the ticket, is what we would say in the community. So after that, the officer will ask you to sign. Well, in most departments, your failure to sign results in an arrest. So I hear a lot of people are told not to sign a ticket. If you look at the bottom of the summons, it will tell you that this is not an admission of guilt. So like I tell my sons, comply with the police officer, sign the ticket, and go about your business. If a police officer does something wrong, you handle that at the police station with their supervisor, or you can request a supervisor on scene, or you can handle it by filing what we call an internal affairs complaint, which would be the equivalent on a normal job or a regular job of asking for the supervisor to make a verbal complaint. Well, we do written complaints in the police departments, most police departments, except they want it in writing. And that is how the traffic stop should be handled. You got to think, police officers are not taught to let you dictate what happens, so to speak. But in reality, excuse me, you actually are in control, whether you believe it or not, because your actions and your behavior is going to dictate a lot of times whether or not you get a ticket. You know, the purpose of traffic citations is compliance. It's not to make money. So comply with the officer, and then maybe you won't get a ticket. But by all means, comply. You know, it's a ticket. It's not the end of the world, right. And that's what we have a court system for.
Exactly. I totally agree with that one. Now, I'm going to use an incident that I had recently. Okay. One incident was during the construction that's going on 270, and I was up near Florissant Road area, headed eastbound, and traffic comes into a jumble right there, at that time. Now, the traffic jumble was created by a police officer that was
Directing traffic.
and he was in the far right lane, driving about 40 miles an hour, and everyone is scared to go past him.
Of course.
Okay?
Right.
So, I'm leaving the dealership.
Okay.
I'm in the far left lane. Okay? Up against the median wall.
Okay.
Traffic merges, everything slows. 18-wheeler pins basically next to me up against the wall. So I speed past that, and when I do that, I in turn get past the cop. Okay. So now he done threw on his flashers.
The lights. Equipment. Okay.
And he gives me a ticket for speeding.
Right.
Okay. In a situation like that, am I wrong? Am I right? Or isn't there an issue about safety?
Yes.
Things?
Well, again, I say if you're trying to be safe, you're always right.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. To your personal safety is paramount above all. So again, police officers are not perfect. I'll be the first one to tell you. We all make mistakes, and sometimes what we see may not be the full picture. It's just like when we watch these body cam footage. It's a glimpse into a particular segment of a whole event. So if he did his job and rendered you a ticket and cited you for what he felt was something that was wrong, then you have a right to go to court and explain your side. And most judges, when you explain it like that, will, I'm sure, you probably beat the ticket.
Well, no, I haven't even been to court yet.
Okay, so I would say explain it just like you explained it to me, and just know that we're not perfect. And again, we are tasked with trying to enforce the laws and traffic regulations, and sometimes we make mistakes too.
Right.
So that's what I'm gonna say to that.
Right.
I mean, we're not perfect. That's what I'm gonna say.
Exactly.
But I would say to any citizen, maintain your safety at all times. Be safe. If that means you got to speed up a little bit to keep from getting crushed by an 18-wheeler. I normally ask people, well, and part of the 8-step car stop also, to go back to that, is to ask the citizen, well, was there a reason for your speed? I've pulled people over on the way to a funeral. Unless you drunk and hit 3 cars, I'm not going to cite you on the way to a funeral. And the reason that I want is I know better. And when I was 18, going to my grandfather's funeral, 2 St. Louis City police officers pulled me over and cited me on the way to the wake. So that was part of the reasoning of me becoming a police officer, because I felt like I could be a more empathetic police officer and show some empathy in certain situations. And I believe that's what most police officers do.
Yeah, it seems like that would be most officers want to call.
I mean, when we see things on television, we got to understand that that's TV's job, is to sell the story. So they're not going to report on the 100,000 safe traffic stops that police officers conduct daily. They'll report on the ones that go bad.
Exactly.
As they should, though.
Exactly.
As they should.
Exactly.
But I'm just saying, we all have to start taking the emotion out of things and trying to look at the thing without emotion in it. And that's hard for us because humans are emotional creatures.
You're right.
But we got to learn to check that emotion and try to look at things without the emotion. And a lot of times we'll see if we remove the emotion out of things, we can kind of solve it.
Okay, gotcha. Now, we were speaking, you spoke of having sons. I spoke to you about me having sons myself.
Right.
And this also works for our young women. Okay. Now, a lot of times when they come in contact with law enforcement, You know, it already is. We're on the defensive as a
Right.
people.
As a people, because historically,
Because
our
of
treatment.
history.
Exactly, and any police officer that does not recognize that is not aware and is not a well-informed police officer.
Okay, then.
Historically, as a people, we have been treated unfairly by the police, just historically.
You're
and
right.
that doesn't mean every police officer. And as we can see, there was a time where we could say that the majority of mistreatment is a common myth in our society, was done by Caucasian police officers. Well, now we see that's not even necessarily true.
Exactly.
So again, we got to start broadening our mind scope, and that's not to say, that again, every police officer, every white police officer, every Hispanic police officer, Asian police officer is out there to hurt people. Let me just say this so I can get it out the way. There is not a farm that we grow police officers on. Police officers are taken from the general population, contrary to popular belief. There's not a factory that they produce us in and put in us what they need us to have. So when you draw from the general population, you're going to...
What?
Okay. So, like I was saying, there is not a farm, there is not a plant, a production plant that we grow and train police officers on. Police officers are drawn from the general population. And if you know anything about human nature, police officers are taught the rule of 10%. And that rule simply says we spend 90% of our time dealing with 10% of the population. So if you can grasp a hold of that, that means that 90% of the world are law-abiding, good people. There is only 10%, as a rule, as a general rule, that is the bad apple, the criminal element. It's just that the media sensationalizes everything to the point where you would think that the criminals outnumber the good people. And as soon as a young police officer realizes that, he should realize that roundabout right into his first or second year of policing, especially in an urban area. He should get to the point where he understands, well, man, these ain't nothing but good people just trying to live just like I am. So with that being said, just keep in mind that there are going to be unfortunately bad police officers, and it is not incumbent upon the general public to root those police officers out. That is our job. That is where we have failed the community, in my opinion, as a police force, as a police profession, I should say. When these command staff officers, which are your chiefs, your captains, your watch commander lieutenants, superintendents, commissioners, when they get notice, so to speak, word or a report or a complaint of a officer, and they do not do what needs to be done, as far as when an officer has done something very egregious. And when I say egregious, I mean what we saw with Tyree Nichols.
Okay.
That, I would bet you, is not the first time those officers have done that.
Exactly. Now, when you mentioned all of those officers and their leaders, they're trained investigators.
They should be.
Now,
they shouldn't be in those positions
and
without
that's what confuses with the community. How is it that you can investigate community things when you see what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're
But
saying.
when it comes to these officers that get these complaints, because as you said, more than likely,
That's not the first time.
We know that's not the first.
Exactly.
To do those type of actions,
Exactly. That's a build-up.
That's a build-up.
Right.
You
right.
see, so
Right.
you know this is the case here, but it seems like those upper officers, when them incidents happen, now all investigative tools done all of a sudden got lost. We don't understand how to go about the process of...
Well, I'm gonna say this. and I've always said it, we as police officers, there's enough blame to go around. I'm gonna say this.
Okay.
70% of the fault for bad police officers, and when I say bad police officers, I'm not talking about a police officer that give you a ticket because you deserve one. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the incidents that we have seen over the last 10, 15 years, going back to a lot of people like to start with Mike Brown. I don't start with Mike Brown. I go back to Tamir. Tamir Rice. Although
exactly.
Although he wasn't killed by a police officer, the justice system failed us. You know, so and we'll talk about that in a minute. But to get back to police officers, like I said earlier, it is not incumbent upon the general public to police the police. We are to police ourselves. We sit down with a suspect I'm a former detective also. So the way it works at most departments, you come in as a newbie, as a rookie. You're taught the ropes on field training. That's called field training. And then you are placed on your own. And then you go from there. Some departments have steps where you become a corporal, which is right up under a sergeant. And then you go into the detective bureau. You spend some time in the detective bureau learning how to really investigate. And then you are promoted to sergeant. And then that starts your command or your supervisory experience from that point as a sergeant. So, you know, we, as detectives, we sit in and I'm talking about police officers, we sit in a interrogation room with a suspect, and we, whatever they've done, let's say this guy stabbed his brother. Okay. And we will sit in an interrogation room and interrogate this guy and tell him how wrong he is, and you know how bad of a person he is, and all of that, and how he should be ashamed of himself, and what he needs to do is tell the truth and all of that. My problem is we should do that to bad police officers also. So like you said, my problem with policing from the beginning, I assume, my 34 years is we do not hold ourselves to the same accountability that we hold the citizens to. And that is why we are where we are now. Citizens can't come in the police department and fire bad policemen. That's our job. That's the command staff job. That's the sergeant's job. The sergeant, my job that I hold right now, is said to be one of the most important jobs in a police department. And I believe that. We the gatekeepers. We the gatekeepers. So when I see some behavior that is not right, becoming, fitting, ethical, whatever the case may be, I address it. I don't care about your feelings. I believe in this profession. I have people in my family that you may stop, and that's what police officers don't understand. When we allow the rogue police officers, the bad police officers to do things, karma has a way of coming back in a way that you just don't expect it. It might be funny for them at that time for them to beat that young man for whatever their reasons were. But what each individual officer didn't realize is what happened when your little brother is stopped by your comrades and they don't realize he your brother.
Exactly.
And your you understand?
Exactly.
So in this profession, I can't really treat you one way and expect for my family to be safe from the same people that I allow to treat someone bad. Because that's the way things happen. Karma works like that. Yes. One of my coworkers has a phrase: karma has no menu. You get served what you deserve. And that's true.
That's true.
So when it comes to bad police behavior, that is not the citizens' fault. That is incumbent on us. We as a profession have to root bad police officers out. Point blank, period. I know that's, we call each other brother and all of that. Well, here's my thing. Like I tell my officers, after we watched this Tyree Nichols thing. If I'm your brother and I'm calling you my brother, I take that seriously. So part of being your brother is if I see you going down the wrong road, I like you enough that I'm gonna pull you. Hey man, chill out, go over there. I got it. You understand what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So when we get in this culture, because police work is a culture.
Exactly.
And the culture has to be fixed from within. Most things can't be affected from the outside. Would you agree?
You're right. I totally agree.
Most things have to be affected from inside, because that's one, it takes the work and knowledge of that thing to understand how it works to affect some change.
Okay.
So therefore, that's our fault.
Now let me ask you this. Do a lot of that shouldn't it originally start with the certification process, the weeding out of...
I'm glad you asked that question. I can't test your heart.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
I can give you a psych test.
Right.
But I can't test your heart.
Right.
The psych test is going to tell me that you're not homicidal, suicidal, or psychotic. Okay. It's not going to tell me whether or not you got a good heart.
Right. That's true.
And that's our problem.
Right.
So while we on that subject, everybody wants to jump on and say they need to be trained better. I'm going to tell you from my experience, and I've been around a lot of police officers, we are some of the best trained police officers. And I'm not just saying that. When you were setting up, I was looking I got a tub of nothing but books from the police academy and training courses. Police officers in the United States, generally speaking now, I'm not talking about maybe the smaller police departments down in a little country town. I'm talking about these urban, suburban police departments are very well trained. I put our training up against any police department in the world. We're some of the best trained police departments. Our problem is we can't look in your heart and tell what's in your heart. Exactly. I can train you to do the right thing, but if your heart is bad, I can't fix that.
Right.
If you've ever watched any police academy training, police training is paramilitary training, which means it's similar and patterned after the military.
Correct.
So when cadets or recruits are walking through the police academy, they're taught to square corners, stand at attention, and everybody is sir or ma'am. Everybody is sir or ma'am. If you are walking through the police academy and they don't call you sir or ma'am, they might do 50 push-ups. So the problem is when they leave that police department, there is a disconnect between what they were taught and what the culture now teaches them. That's the problem. It ain't the training. The training is on spot. We're taught sir, ma'am, no ma'am, yes ma'am. We're taught if we're effecting an arrest and a person suffers a heart attack, if they've killed somebody, it doesn't matter. Our job now switches from arrest to lifesaver to render aid.
Right.
So it's not the training. People got to get out of that. People got to stop. It has nothing to do with the training. It has to do with a person's heart and what kind of person they are. Okay. It's what kind of police officer they're going to be.
Now let me ask you a question that's on this qualified immunity for officers.
Okay.
Okay. Now, with a lot of the recent incidents that happened, you know, why is that something that an officer feels they need to have?
Well, it's something that's given to the officer by law.
Okay.
And the mindset behind that, from my limited understanding of what the big reason is, kind of common sense. So you ask a police officer to go out here and do an ungodly job at times. And that job is one of the most unique jobs in the world, first of all. We are the only profession in the world that is allowed to be at a given time judge, jury, and execution. No other job does that. No other job. So when you give someone that type of authority and power, the great legal minds realized that there are going to be mistakes. That's what the purpose of qualified immunity was, a mistake, not an intentional act. We're chasing somebody, he's got a gun, and we see the gun, we round the corner, and he points a cell phone at us because he done dropped the gun, but we thinking it's the gun. That's a mistake. That's a legitimate. That officer was in, because they saw a gun. The gun is on the body camera. We see the gun. Much like the kid in Chicago.
Okay.
Saying that's a qualified immunity where we understand.
Okay.
You know, like he had a gun. It wasn't like they murdered the kid. He had a gun. Unfortunately, when he turned around and they rounded the corner and he spun on them,
it was the cell phone.
It was a cell phone, and it was a split-second decision. Now, does that officer need to lose everything he has because he's doing a job that the public asked him to do, chasing a guy with a gun? And we got to take the emotion out of it. Yes, he's a child. I don't know a police officer in this world that wants to shoot a child.
Right.
I don't know one. I've never heard one say it.
Right.
White, black, green, brown, it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, it's a mistake, and this person had a firearm and refused to comply.
Right. I get you.
So that's the purpose of qualified immunity. It should for a accident.
Right.
Because they realize in giving this scope of work, there are going to be some mistakes, and we're not going to punish an officer for doing what we asked him to do when he was doing the right thing.
Right.
You know, now conversely, that doesn't mean that you get to go out here and murder somebody and nothing happens to you.
Exactly.
That's not what qualified immunity is.
Okay.
For. Okay.
So I'm glad you explained that, because I've heard that a lot. You know, that term being thrown out and used a lot in instances.
And unfortunately, bad cops hide behind it. You know what I'm saying? It's one of them things where anything that we have in this world can be used for good or bad, regardless of the intentionality of it at conception. In other words, no matter what it was built for, it can be used either way. A gun can be used for self-defense, or it can be used for murder.
Right. Exactly.
It just depends on what the person's intentionality is at the time that they possess it.
Right.
So that's one of those things. We can look at qualified immunity the same way. Its intention was to help good cops when they make a mistake, but it can also be conversely used for bad cops to hide behind.
You're right. I got you.
Right.
Now, prosecutorial
discretion.
Yeah, prosecutorial discretion starts with the officer. Am I correct?
No, sir. Prosecutorial discretion refers to a prosecutor ability to dismiss a case for whatever his reasoning is.
But it also extends because
you're talking about officer discretion.
But
that's called officer discretion.
It's the same type of discretion.
It's just called two different things.
You're extension. I used it as an extension of the prosecutor.
Yes. I mean, same concept, different wording.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Officer discretion. Officers are given discretion on certain misdemeanor, infraction type crimes. We are not given discretion in any state or police department I know of concerning felonies. Okay. So in other words, if I witness a murder, I'm not given the discretion to say, oh, you know what, he asked for that.
Right.
That's not how that works.
Right.
That's not how that works. I have discretion whether or not I want to give you a ticket on a traffic stop.
Okay.
I don't have discretion to let a murderer walk away or someone just shot somebody walk away, regardless of what I think. They shot somebody, we got to investigate. That person has to be detained right now until we figure out what's going on. And then there has to be a prosecutorial review.
Right.
So that's how that works.
Okay, then. Now, I want to talk to you getting back to the interaction for our youngsters with the police. Now, if it's late at night scenario and officer pulls over, I'm going to use me as an example again.
Okay.
I was over in Ferguson one night. I'm riding down West Florissant. It's about 2:30 in the morning. And it was a fire department bus, medical bus in one lane. I'm in the center lane, headed. Apparently, Ferguson police was off to the side somewhere, and we're just, both of us are just riding along, me and the other guy riding along. And all of a sudden, Ferguson gets behind me, pulls me over, stop. And now, when he comes to the car, the question he asked me was, did I ride around the bus?
Okay.
That fire bus or whatever.
You talking about the
the fire truck. The ambulance.
Fire truck.
Yeah, the ambulance.
Oh, the ambulance.
It didn't have no lights on or anything at the time.
Right.
We're both just riding down the street.
Right.
So he pulls me over. Two cops get out. One come to the driver's side, the other go on the passenger side. You know, I turn my interior light on so they can see. You know, because I heard that's the thing you do.
Right.
You know, so he asked me that question. I tell him no. I say, where'd you get that from? Now, in an instance like that, how am I as a citizen, if you were the citizen at that time, how would you handle that?
Well, I would try to get an understanding because clearly